Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. This is the Chorus Call conference operator. Welcome and thank you for joining the conference call for the presentation of the Acea Group as at the end of 2018. As a reminder, all participants are in listen-only mode. After the presentation, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. Should anyone need assistance during the conference call, they may signal an operator by pressing star and 0 on their telephone. At this time, I would like to hand you over to Ms. Angrigiani, who is the Manager of Investor Relations of Acea. You have the floor, ma'am. Now, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining this conference call, during which we shall present the result of the Acea Group as at December 2018. Here with me, we have the CEO, Mr. Donnarumma, and the CFO, Mr. Gola. They will both present the results, and then we shall have your questions at the end. Mr. Donnarumma, you have the floor, please. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Now, I will go through the highlights of the results, and then I'll hand you over to the CFO, Mr. Gola, and he will get into the details of the results of the different businesses of the company. As you can see from the presentation, we had very good results. EBITDA is up 11%, as you can see, to 933 million euros. Please remember that this result includes the consolidation of the last 2 months of 2018 of the Gore company, where we have a stake. This is a value of 12 million euros, which are part of the 933 million euros. EBITDA 33%, 479 million euros, 50% net profit, and 271 million euros versus the previous year. As we said in the press release, this is an unprecedented result. It's a historical result, higher than what we achieved in the past. As to capex, as you can see, we actually slightly went above our yearly target. Capex amounted to 631 million euros, up 19% versus 2017. 88% of such investments are related to regulated businesses. You remember that when we presented the business plan at the end of 2017, well, the business plan envisaged 3.1 billion euros of investments in 5 years, and which means that for every year after the first year, it was a matter of investing 620 million euros, whereas you can see we invested this year 631 million euros. Net debt, in this case, we are above our guidance, 2,568 million euros. The dividends that we are going to propose to the shareholders meeting is up 13%. There is 0.71 euro cents. The payout ratio is 56%. Let me now move on to page 3 of the presentation. Well, here, let me remind you a number of items which related to factors occurred in 2018. At the beginning of 2018, we signed an agreement with Open Fiber for the rollout of the ultra-fast broadband communications in the city of Rome, and this agreement was then followed with a number of activities to implement the contract and also operations, which in the fall of 2018 led to the open up of works and the construction sites and the work necessary to lay down the network. This is a fiber optic network, the most modern technologies, allowing the citizens of Rome to use the ultra-fast broadband network. Well, this is an opportunity for our market, and and also we ourselves are going to use this network, and we actually did this in order to implement advanced automation and control of our network. And also we will also be able to offer the customers what we call smart services. As to financial issues, in February 2018, we issued a bond amounting to 1 billion euros, three tranches, 300 million, maturing on the 8th of February 2023, coupon interest of 3 months Euribor plus 0.37%, second tranche 700 million, maturing 8th of June 2027 and paying a fixed rate of 1.5%. Well, this issue is actually helping us to implement our investment plans. We now entered finally into the gas distribution market. We closed an agreement to acquire a 51% stake in the Pescara Distribuzione Gas, a company. Well, this is the first step for us to be able to develop this business. And our goal, as you remember in the business plan, and then we shall also go through it, well, the goal is that of becoming, in a matter of 1 year and a half, a meaningful operator in the gas distribution market, considering also the tenders that might be issued in the next few months or years of the business plan. Now, moreover, we were confirmed our ratings by Moody's and Fitch. Moody's Baa2 outlook stable, and Fitch ratings BBB plus outlook stable. This is very important for us, as is the agreement between GORI, the Campania Regional Authority, and the local concession authority. Well, this in the past gave us a few headaches, and we had to make some good work. We had to establish a cooperation with the local authorities, and thanks to the good work made by our managers, we managed to restructure the company to draft and present a business plan which implies meaningful investments for GORI, with a redistribution of debt that the company had with the regional authority, and with the shareholders that gave us the possibility, together with a banking syndicate, to be able to implement this project. Meanwhile, we could review tariffs, but we managed to then consolidate the company. The value of this consolidation, you see it already in our accounts. In only 2 months, the company generated 12 million euros of EBIT, which is now part of the consolidated result of the company. Well, at this point, let us move on to the guidance for 2019. We expect the EBITDA to grow by 5-6% versus 2018. 2018 was closed today with the presentation of the financial statements and accounts, and then capex up by over 10% versus 631 million euros of 2018, and the net debt between 2.85 and 2.95 billion euros. Well, this has as an effect meaningful investments that, as you can see, we are planning. Now, we expect to present an update of the business plan, which will not only be really a mere update of the business plan. It will entail a number of novelties, and the business plan, we think we will present it on the 2nd of April 2019, and it's very likely we should do that in the city of Milan. Let me now move on to page number 5 of the presentation, and here you can see the results of the different businesses. Now, what is to be underlined is that regulated businesses are continue to account for 77% of the overall EBITDA, which as a whole amounts to 933 million euros. Now, 45% of the regulated business, of the EBITDA is attributable to the water business. We operate in Lazio, Tuscany, Umbria, and Campania, and we have 9 million customers that we serve. As to the energy infrastructure, as you can see on page 4, well, this includes not only electricity distribution for the city of Rome, but also public lighting and the production of power. Well, this industrial business accounts for 37% of the consolidated result, EBITDA 361 million euros. Let me remind you that the size of our energy distribution area is quite large. We rank second among electricity distributor providers, and we provide we distribute 10 terawatt of power in Rome. Please remember that Rome is a city where we have 1,650 1,650,000 inhabitants, and they usually are households. As to the other business, commercial and trading, 8% of consolidated EBITDA, 76 million euros. Well, this is a result which is flat, stable, and in 2019 we expect, as you'll hear later on, to evolve our services here. As to the environment business, we had here 7% of the consolidated EBITDA, 66 million euros. We actually are above 1 million tons of waste treated. We have grown by almost 10% in 2018. In the business plan, we said that we wanted to reach within the business plan period to 1.7 million euros. Now, all of the activities that we are carrying out in this moment makes us believe that we can achieve this business. And this is a very good result for us because this is a business that we want to develop, and also there is a need for the growth of this business in our area. Overseas, 3% of consolidated EBITDA. Our presence in Latin America is growing and becoming quite well established. Now, let us move on to page 5 of the presentation. Here you have the financial highlights. Consolidated revenues above 3 billion euros in 2018, actually 3 billion and 28 millions. EBITDA 933 million euros, up 11.1%. Well, I think it is important to underline and clarify that when it comes to our growth, 7% is organic growth out of this growth of 11%. There are a number of one-offs which will be explained by Mr. Gola. Without our one-offs, we would have had the EBITDA grow by 905 million euros, which would have meant 7.7% growth. Now, we had to change our guidance during the year because of the performances that we were recording quarter by quarter. EBIT 478 million euros, plus 33%. Group net profit up 50%, 271 million euros. And then, as I said before, a dividend per share is growing by 12.7%, and we shall propose to the shareholders a dividend of 0.71 euro cents per share versus 0.63 euro cents per share of last year. CapEx 631 million euros versus 532 million euros of 2017. Acea has always invested a lot, but the business plan actually envisages is an acceleration of investments. As you can see, year after year, 100 million euros of capex more. Please remember, these are not easy investments, meaning that these are not mere IT or technological investments, but they are investments in our infrastructures, or new infrastructures which require authorization processes. And the processes are not easy to follow, but the machinery that we have has worked quite well thanks to the preparation for this work that we put in place in 2017, so as to be able to then implement the business plan that we presented. And we're very glad because this work is now bearing its fruit. Now, as to the net debt, 2,568 million euros versus the previous net debt that is up 6%, which is justified by the investments that we made. Now, this is it as far as I'm concerned. I will hand you over to Mr. Gola, who will give you the details for the different businesses of the group. Thank you very much, Stefano, and thank you for joining this conference call. Now, Stefano, the CEO, went through the main results that we achieved. I will try to give you some more details. I will get into the details of the results, and I will explain the drivers behind the growth of the Acea Group. Page 6 of the presentation. Here you can see the EBITDA by business and how it has evolved from 880 million in 2017. You can see that we achieved 933 million euros at the end of 2018, 71 million euros, water, energy infrastructure, 28 million euros. The other businesses grew limitedly. And then we have a negative item of other, which is basically due to the penalty, or fine that the group had to pay from the antitrust fine. We shall appeal to the administrative tribunal, but we had provided for this figure before we were levied this fine. So you need to then consider that the group results was 921 million euros plus 12 million euros of GORI for the last 2 months of the year, so the total 933 million euros. In the bottom part of this slide, we show you the evolution of the organic growth, considering also that we had some one-offs. The organic growth was estimated by 65 million euros, much higher than the initial guidance that we gave before, because it accounts for 7.7% growth. Then you have to add some factors like the change in perimeter, 12 million due to GORI, or non-recurrent items, 16 million the antitrust fine, 13 million non-recurring effects on the water segment, which are basically related to things that related to the past. That is the effects of the application of the tariff update versus the previous years. In the water segment, we also had the post-closing adjustments. That is the result that we consolidate in the year of companies that we consolidate at net equity. When we close the financial accounts, we only post an estimated value, and then the year after we post the actual difference. In this case, we have some 2 million euros more, and then also we had accrues that are related to the provisions, which are then released, and this 15 million euros, and then other non-recurring items, 4 million euros. These other non-recurring items are related to tariffs And then we have in the energy infrastructure segment 5 million euros related to tariffs again. Then let's now see area by area or segment by segment. Let's see the main drivers of behind our growth. The business that has grown the most is the water business that has grown by 72 million euros. What are the main drivers behind this growth? 13 million euros, as we said before, are non-recurring items, whereas structural results are 30 million euros of EBITDA generated by ATO2, and these are related to tariffs, basically. 6 million ATO5, 8 million are lower costs, that is efficiencies, and 15 million are related to the consolidation of our companies that we consolidate at net equity. That is, this is the pro rata of the net companies, of the net results of those companies, and then you have to add the 12 million euros of GORI.
Among the most important financial highlights for water business, all the main tariff reviews have been completed in most companies, and then we have increased the collections of ATO2 due to optimized collection strategy. As for investments, 330 million versus 271 in 2017. As for the energy infrastructure, page 8, EBITDA amounts to 361 million versus 333 of 2017. And in this regard, we already showed that roughly 13 million, actually 15 million, refer to non-recurring items. And then let's drill down on this figure. 15 million are accounted for by 7 million update of tariffs of previous year, 5 million accruals, and 5 million is the result of the Sati deal. Then distribution grew by 20 million as a consequence of a tariff update in 2018, while production, or generation, grew by roughly 10 million, which 5 million referred to the Sati deal, and 5 million referred to higher generation due to more abundant rainfalls and to higher tariffs. We have a negative figure about public lighting, where we are down by 10 million roughly. These 10 million compared with the previous year are broken down as follows: 5 million less margin because in 2017 we still benefited from the LED transformation project of public lighting, and 5 million refer to higher costs borne in 2018, mainly to improve the quality of service. We are currently focusing on public lighting to make this business go back to break even in 2019. As for the key financial highlights of energy infrastructure, as a consequence of investments made, we have reported substantial increase of investments from 209 to 238 million. As a consequence of this investment, we have renewed more than 500 kilometers of MV/LV grid. On the following page, we have the commercial and trading business. The EBITDA result is flat and is the result of a mix of effects. For instance, we have experienced a drop of margin in the free market, only partially offset by the growth in the number of clients of the free market. As for the enhanced protection market, margins have remained flat. We have reported a drop in the number of clients in the enhanced protection market, offset by the increase of profitability of the clients as a consequence of the increase of tariffs in the enhanced protection market. As for the financial highlights, we have reported substantial reduction of the inbound calls that dropped by 29%, which mirrors the improvement of the customer experience and the quality of the service we provide our customers. On page 10, you see the performance of the environment business. Again, we are slightly improving our performance of the environment business, mainly as a consequence of better performance of the waste-to-energy business, or the increased contribution of the waste-to-energy business due to an increase of tariffs and to greater production. The improvement reported by Acea Ambiente is partially offset by a poorer performance of Acqua Industriale and Acquaser that show the difficulties faced by these two companies in sludge treatment over the years, in particular last year. We are currently focusing on the Monte Rotondo plant. Work are in progress, and we were given authorization for the Oviedo landfill. On page 11, we have a quick overview of the other businesses. The overseas reach an increase, or reported an increase of the positive contribution from Aguas de San Pedro. Engineering and services, EBITDA 18 million versus 14.5 of 2017, thanks to an increase of the research and innovation activity of the group companies, and the holding company reports a slightly poorer result. But here we have to consider the impact of 16 million referred to the antitrust authority fee. Moving on to EBIT and net profit. So our EBIT reached 479 million, up 33% versus 2017 when it was at 359.9, and this is mainly the result of the growth of our EBITDA, but also the drop in write-downs, 75 million versus 2017. 9 million last year included 15 million write-downs for the Gala company, which are not there this year or in 2018. So you see very good performance for as far as provisions are concerned, and this is mainly the result of the consolidation of a Gori company that led to the release of risk provisions that we had created because we had provided for the whole value of our stake in Gori, namely 44 million. Then we see an increase of depreciations reaching 366 million. This is mainly the result of an increase in capex and also different mix of capex on IT that enjoy higher depreciation rates. As a consequence, our net profit increased by 50% up to 271 million versus 2017 when it was 180. So our tax rate was 30.4% in line with our expectations. As for our dividend payout, Stefano already mentioned our dividend payout that will be submitted to the general shareholders meeting, 0.71 euro per share. Total dividend would amount to 151 million roughly, a dividend yield growing versus the previous year at 5.3%. This is the dividend yield based on the average value of the stock in the previous year, and the dividend payout of 56%. And now, very quickly, a few words about capex that, as you heard, are growing substantially, especially in the water and the energy infrastructure businesses. As for the water business, capex is growing by 58 million, including 10 million that refers to the investments that were made in the Gori company during the 2 months of consolidation. Like for like, we invested mainly in the energy infrastructure, so upgrade and expansion of grid, revamping of power plants. As for the energy infrastructure, we reported an increase of capex by 29 million. As already pointed out, we are going to upgrade our grid and expand our grid by 500 kilometers, and as I said, the revamping of the Mandela power plant. As for commercial and trading, here we have mainly an accounting effect because we capitalize the agent's fees this year according to IFRS 15 principle that in past years were expensed differently. As for the environment business, capex are growing by 5 million for the work or the activity carried out in the Terni and San Vittore waste-to-energy plants, the work on waste treatment and biogas production of the plants in the Orvieto landfill, and the expansion of the Monte Rotondo plant. Coming to our cash flow, well, this is a very interesting point I would like to highlight. Over the past year, we have constantly reported improvement of our working capital, and the final result for 2018 is definitely very good when compared with the previous year. In 2018, we have 35 million working capital absorption, of which 5 million are related to the Gori consolidation. So working capital absorption during the year is on average 5 million, if you do not include the 18 million referred to the Gori. So we have reported substantial improvement also in our collection performance, especially in ATO2 and the water business, where credit collection increased by 80 million versus the previous year. Focusing on Q4 2018, compared with Q3, working capital created cash for roughly 170 million, and this is clearly the consequence of the seasonal nature of this business. So in 2019, we will also have the impact of the seasonal nature that will make Q4 very positive, Q1 negative, and Q2 and 3 flat or almost flat. This happened in 2017 too, but compared with 2017 in Q4, we generated 40 million additional cash versus Q4 2017. I'm going to anticipate a question that I'm frequently asked. So, to what extent or what is the percentage of the EBITDA generated by the company is a cash EBITDA? As you can see from the cash flow, 933 million EBITDA is then adjusted, if you will, by a number of items. For instance, provisions for loss provision accounts for a substantial part, considering that this provision is accounted for below the EBITDA. Then under other, we report the EBITDA adjustment, cash adjustment, as a consequence of equity consolidation of the group's companies. So here we have 49 million of EBITDA generated by the equity consolidated companies, net of the dividends paid by these companies. So this is, if you will, EBITDA cash, EBITDA correction or adjustment. Then we have to add a cash reduction or a EBITDA cash reduction due to regulations governing the water and the electricity business, amounting to roughly 54 million. 21 refers to the water business and 33 to the energy infrastructure business. What are these items? For instance, for the water business, this is the impact of rebates to suppliers. This year it amounted to 34 million. Bonuses from suppliers. And this has an impact on cash flow. So that said, our net working capital, there was negative by 18 million net of the Gori deal, net of this regulatory impact, we would generate cash up to 30 million. So if we consider total cash flow, you see cash absorption of 147 million, and on the following page, you see that this cash absorption has led to an increase of the net debt from 2.421 million to 2.568 billion. If compared with the generated EBITDA, we have at the end of 2018 a net debt equity ratio of 2.8, versus 2017 of 2.9 times. As for debt structure, no changes have occurred. Fixed rate accounts for 79% with the average cost of 2.21%, and this is mainly, the drop in the average cost is mainly the result of the bond issuance that took place January 2018. The average term of debt is 5.8 years. Ratings were confirmed by the two rating agencies, as Stefano already pointed out. Despite the deterioration of the rating of the Italian sovereign debt, we haven't experienced any impact on our ratings. So BBB, stable outlook for Fitch Ratings, and Baa2, and stable outlook for Moody's. Thank you very much, and now we are able to take your questions, and we can start the Q&A session. This is the Chorus Call operator. We will now begin the question and answer session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question may press star and 1 on their touch-tone telephone. To remove yourself from the question queue, press star followed by 2. We kindly ask you to use handsets when asking questions. Anyone who has a question may press star and 1 at this time. The first question is from Mr. Ade Suarez, Mediobanca.
Good evening. Thank you very much for taking my questions. I have actually 3 or 4 questions to ask. Now, the first is of a general nature. Now, I wanted to have from you an update of what is going on within Parliament on the DAGA law, which may have an impact on the water distribution business. Can you give us your view? Can you tell us what is going on within Parliament? So any comment about this from you, it would be very useful. Second question, now the guidance of the company, and especially of the debt, 2.9 billion euros, which means a growth of 300 million euros versus the end of 2018. I think that 100 or so million euros are related by higher capex, and can you tell us what is related to the other 200 million euros? Maybe a GORE impact, but then I don't think that is all. Can you give us some explanation about this? Another question about the EBITDA guidance. Well, I think it's a very conservative figure. Now, if you remove the one-offs and you include GORE for 12 months, you will have the EBITDA growing by 4%. Now, so a growth of 6% that you announced before in your guidance, isn't that conservative in the light of what I said? And then another question, net income 2019. Of course, you see it grow versus 2018. That was the question. Do you see it grow versus 2018? And then another question, the dividends that you paid in 2018, can we see that as a floor going forward? Well, another question. So we'll take the questions. First of all, the CEO will take some of them. Now, as to the water business and about the DAGA bill, now, the discussion in Parliament is scheduled to start on the 25th of March. This is the current situation. I guess you may have read something about the amendments to the draft bill. Quite a high number of amendments were put forward also by one of the two government parties, the Lega, which is certainly not in line with the idea of the other party, of the other ruling party, the Five Star Movement. Well, this being said, we believe that the Parliament discussion will then certainly bring about a number of amendments versus the original bill. What we are mostly concerned about is the duration of concessions. Among the amendments, there was one which proposed to move the end of the mandate at the end of 2027 as a mandatory deadline. Please remember there are concessions expire in 2032, 2031, so not very far from 2027, but we believe that the correct concession should be left as it is until it comes to its natural expiry date. We believe that the debate in Parliament will lead to the correct coverage of tariffs or investments to be paid by tariffs. You need a lot of investments, and it's very difficult for the central government to bear these costs, especially in this period. And I don't think I'm the only one to see this as a very complex issue. And so the tariff coverage has to be considered as we discussed with the Environment Committee. So the tariff coverage is something that we believe is necessary. Because it provides a basis to cover the investments. Then, of course, there may be investments that may be paid by the central government through taxes, but the central government in this moment cannot pay everything. And so, this being said, we believe, and honestly so, that we are a very virtuous company. The Acea model, in our view, should be studied with a lot of attention by others, because the figures that we just presented, and let me propose you to do this. Now, consider our profits and then look at the distribution of our profits. 56% of our profits are distributed, where the overall result is accounted for by 45% by the water business. It means maybe they were not distributing everything, all of the profit that we get in the water business. But if you consider our companies in which we have a stake, which we get paid for, that is, we get the profits. We distribute 5 times the profits produced by the water business by Acea. Now we are, I believe, in the right direction, and we have been doing this for some time. And of course, if you want the operator to preserve the quality of the water, this means that all of the activities that we have in our business plan go in this direction, and this is also shown by the bonuses that we are paid for by the suppliers. And so, from this point of view, I believe, and I'm saying this not only to you, but we communicated this also to the political forces that are discussing and debating this issue. Well, this being said, let me hand you over to Mr. Gola to take your question number 2. Well, Javier, it's very simple to give you an explanation. In 2018, considering the performance also of the net working capital, we absorbed 150 million euros of cash, which correspond to the dividend that we pay. In 2019, considering our guidance, you need to add 100 million euros of investments more, a bit more than 100 investments, about 50 million euros of taxes paid more. Now, 2018 was a very good year. Profit this year has grown, so 50 million euros of tax to pay more. Dividends have grown by 17 million euros, and the working capital, if you take a very challenging target, our working capital absorption is below 50 million euros, of which 20 million are related to GORI consolidation, and so which means that we will be able to have a stable performance of the working capital. So 180 million euros of overall cash absorption, which is related to the average level of indebtedness that we gave in our guidance. Of course, we tend to try and overperform the guidance that we issue. Now, the CEO takes the floor again to answer the other 3 questions. As to the EBITDA, now, what you said when you asked your question, well, I understand it very well, and it is understandable that you may reach the conclusion that 6% might be a conservative figure. But as you know, our company is very practical, and we like to say exactly what we can actually achieve in the future. This is how we manage our company. Of course, you may have better results. Now, when it comes to consolidation processes, we haven't stopped, and so we're still working. So in 2019, you may have something good coming out of this, and the EBITDA may improve. The same applies to M&A's activities. Well, these are to be actually considered, or the results of the M&As are to be taken into account only when the process has started and is completed. And so we may have we also have some activities in the pipeline, but it would not be fair on our part to factor them in because they are due to external factors that we may not control. Of course, we take it as a challenge, but that's it. So this said, well, the same answers can be given to your question about the net profit. So as to the net profit and dividends, I think that you will have some clarifications in the business plan presentation that we will have in April. Thank you.
Next question, Enrico Bartoli, MainFirst. Good evening. A couple of questions on my side too. First question concerns the GORI deal or the GORI agreement. Can you elaborate on it? You mentioned tariff increase. Do you think you may be achieving operating cost efficiency? What is the capex level that you expect following the consolidation of GORI within the business plan horizon? As for EBITDA, can we expect roughly 70 million in terms of EBITDA for 2019? And this is the calculation I made, extrapolating the EBITDA on 2 months following GORI consolidation. And then the contribution of your associate that increased to 16 million, substantial increase vis-a-vis last year. Is this growth level affordable, let's say, in 2019 too, or was this figure impacted on by one-off items in 2018? And then waste-to-energy business. What is your outlook for 2019? If I remember correctly, some green certificates are expected to expire in 2019. So should we expect a step down for this business, or is there anything that may offset this? Can you provide us with an idea of the EBITDA evolution for waste-to-energy? And then commercial business. EBITDA dropped slightly vis-à-vis last year. You highlighted lower margins in the non-regulated market, and this is something different than the experience of other players in this business. So can you elaborate on this? Can you elaborate on the evolution of margin in this area, and particularly in 2019, and I'm referring particularly to the drop in profitability in the regulated market? Are you planning to put in place actions to improve the profitability of this business? Enrico, please. As for Gori, well, I think if I remember correctly, you asked about EBITDA calculation. You can extrapolate, but you don't get to 70. You get to 50, 60 million. CAPEX, we're talking about roughly 50 million. As for the cost efficiency or the cost cutting, yes, definitely we are going to achieve operating efficiencies following core consolidation, so much so that CAPEX will drop progressively over the next 2-3 years, because in the general agreement we have already factored in the transferring of local operations to Gori, including human resources in this region, which means that we will be achieving cost cuttings, which, however, would not have an impact on the head count. Rather, will be insourcing a number of core activities that we have already planned at the time of the agreement with Gori. So we believe that our action plan is absolutely achievable, and therefore we expect cost cutting going forward. As to waste-to-energy business and the question about waste-to-energy, well, last year, in 2017, we had shown a curve, I don't know whether you remember it, showing that in 2019 there would be a drop following the end of incentives. But in our plan, following acquisitions and additional activity, we'll be able to offset this gap, but not in 2019. So let's say that in 2019 we will experience a trough, and this had already been estimated in November 2017, but then you see that this will be offset in the following years thanks to a number of initiatives that we'll be putting in place. As for the contribution of the associates, I hand you over to Gola. Mr. Gola will answer this question. Well, as for the associates, equity consolidated companies, we expect a negative non-recurring impact that is mainly referred to the Società Acque, that in the first part of 2019 will complete its financing, and therefore will have to write down the previous financing scheme with a mark-to-market of the Acea equity of roughly 5 million. So net of this negative impact of 5 million, we expect a steady performance of this company, and the negative impact of tariff increase will be offset by an increase of depreciation and other items. So these equity consolidated companies will report a growing EBITDA. Consider that we consolidate net income, or the net income consolidated will remain almost flat. As for the commercial business, here too, EBITDA is expected to remain flat following a number of items. As for the free market, we experienced a worsening of profitability of our clients, mainly as a consequence of increasing competition and therefore pressure on prices, which is, however, partially offset by the increase in the number of the free market clients. As for the total number of clients in the trading area or the commercial area that reported a growth in the free market clients and a drop of the regulated market clients, experienced a reversal of the trend. So the total number of clients in the last 2 months of 2018 has grown again. As for profitability of the regulated market, considering the natural drop in the number of clients in the regulated market, we have experienced an increase of profitability of every single client following the increase of the RCV tariff. About 2019, what do you expect for the commercial business? Do you expect a positive trend? Do you expect it to remain flat, as was the case in 2018? We'll be providing you with more information when we disclose our strategic plan on the 2nd of April. I don't want to anticipate anything, but we certainly can say that we expect an improvement of performance. Next question, Mr. Gamberini, Equita SIM.
Good evening. My colleagues have partially covered my question. First of all, the RAB at the end of 2018 in the infrastructure and water business. And then I'd like to have an explanation of the working capital. If you estimate 100, we are now at 30. The guidance for next year is again 30. Can we assume that this figure becomes a recurring performance, so we will not have to use the 100, which is the business plan figure? And then is there something that had an impact at the end of the year, like a factoring securitization, which had an impact at the end of 2018? And then another question. Let's assume that nothing changes after the approval of the DAGA bill, and that the management of the water business will not change. Also, the acknowledged costs will not change. If this is the case, can we expect in 2020 a decrease of tariffs of acknowledged costs or recognized costs? And what is your assumption about this? And then can you make a comment about your waste business? Because we talked about M&As and the visibility of such M&As. I expect in 2020 to see a reduction of the WTE performance because of the expiry of the CIP6 in 2020. Am I right? And if so, what is the impact in 2019? Now, the first question is about FONI. ATO 2, 2018, 2 million, ATO 5, 7 million. This is the FONI impact. And then the investments that were managed as FONI, F-O-N-I, and this contributed to the revenues and to EBITDA of the year. As to the question about the working capital, now we are aiming at achieving working capital at the end of 2019 around 40 million euros, 20 million which coming from Gori. This is going to be structural. However, when we present the business plan, we will talk about this, and we have to take into account a number of effects. But we are working to remain below the 100 million euros that we had in the previous business plan, and I believe that this is going to be a feasible result. But the overall details will be outlined during the presentation of the business plan. Let me tell you something else about the West business. CIP 6 expires on the 31st of March 2019, so the rolling impact of a year, which amounts 30 million euros, starts from the 31st of March 2019 to then the end of March of 2020. So basically, 3 quarters in Q3 and 1 quarter in Q1 of 2019-2020 respectively. So let me take your question about the bill. Let's assume that the RERA will be regulated, will continue to be regulated. Well, of course, I expect some discontinuity. We expect that this bill be not approved, and or if it is approved, there will be some amendments. Now, some of the principles that inspire the bill will certainly move forward. Will be somewhat enter into a bill one way or the other. As you know, the bill envisages the shifting of certain competencies, and there is a lot of debate about this. We believe, however, that the authority of a business should be independent, and it should be independent to be a kind of a guarantee for the system and the continuity of the system. Well, this being said, what I can assume is that the legislator will kind of issue a general direction about RERA, not so much to review tariffs, but to review regulation. For instance, I have maintained for some time that the electricity business with cost efficiency curves should actually be implemented, which would have a negative impact for those companies who are not capable to make or to achieve cost efficiencies, but it would be very beneficial for a company like us that are capable to manage their costs and that are capable to manage tariffs or mitigate tariffs effects. Well, I don't know what else to say. I have to say that a number of analysts asked me this question, that is whether the WACC could be reviewed, but I think it's more important to favor investments, and I think it is so important that despite the conclusion of the debate, I think that the legislator will think it twice to kind of hamper investments. Well, have we answered your call, Stefano? Yes. I have another question about the waste business. Well, the guidance plus 6%, is that without any possible M&As? Have I correctly understood? Can you tell us something about what you think you can achieve over and above this, and from what? What kind of assets are you interested in, for instance, if you think about M&As? Well, I'd like not to anticipate anything because this is something we'll get into the details extensively when we present the business plan on the 2nd of April. Well, we said that in the original business plan, we envisaged that growth by 70% in the overall business plan period. Certainly, we do not intend to perform worse than that. Well, the guidance that we issued does not include major M&As deals, which might be concluded by the end of the year, and which would have an impact on next year results or partial results in 2019. Well, I have 20 million euros, however, less in 2018, and then I will achieve plus 6%. This is another question. Well, this is another question that basically Javier asked before when he said that the 6% is conservative. Well, it absorbs the negative impact so far. It's a very challenging performance, and we'll see whether we can overperform during the year. The next question by Emanuele Oggioni with Banca Akros.
Good evening. Thank you very much for taking my questions. In fact, almost all my questions were asked by other analysts, with the exception of one. Can you provide us with a breakdown of RAB between the water business and the electricity network? As for the waste-to-energy business, in the previous plan, you mentioned new plants and additional capacity in composting, in material sorting, and so on and so forth, which means, and also the impact of the new landfill in Orvieto. So will these partially offset the expiration of CHIP 6 in 2019, and to what extent? What is the amount involved? And then a final question about the water pipeline in Peschiera. Can you provide us with an idea of the timeline? So, Giuseppe Gola is going to answer about the question about RAB. Well, we're talking about 1.4 billion for water and 1.2 billion for the energy. I'm sorry, 2.1 billion for the electricity infrastructure. As for the waste-to-energy business, the plants that are being upgraded, particularly in the second part of 2019, should contribute to roughly 200,000 tons additional, in line with the 70% growth that we factored in our plan. Then we have an 80,000 tons plan for sludge treatment that is following the procedures to be given all the authorization without a major obstacles. So I think it's fair to say that by 2020 we'll be able to start the construction of this plant that is going to be essential for us, because it will be one of the first for sludge treatment plants that is going to become a very topical issue going forward. As for the Peschiera plant, we are currently negotiating with the various parties involved. We are discussing technical aspects, and we expect will be given the concession. Actually, the municipality of Roma will be given the concession for the Peschiera plant in the next few months, and as a consequence, Acea will also receive the concession from the municipality of Rome. The state body governing public work has already been involved, so let's say that by early next year our project should be approved of, and we should be able to start organizing calls for bids. Clearly there are external factors that we cannot control, but the goal for our management is celebrating, let's say, the end of my mandate that, as you know, will expire in the spring 2020. So celebrate with the launching of tenders for this plant. So that would be very rewarding for me. I think we answered all your questions. Next question. Follow-up question by Javier Suarez, Mediobanca.
Now, good evening once again. I have two questions about 2019. Now, the tax rate was around 30% this year, and from the presentation, I guessed that. Or you said that the tax rate was somewhat low this year. What is the tax rate that we can assume for 2019? And then another question to understand next year figures, provisions. Which level of provisions will you have in 2019? This year provisions were 88 million. So what is the reasonable figure that we can assume for 2019? As to the tax rate, 30.5% of 2018 was a kind of a natural tax rate, and so we expect it to remain stable. Last year we had higher taxes to pay because of a number of non-deductible costs. So I don't think the tax rate will change going forward. It will remain around this figure, 30%. And then as to provisions, this year provisions are overall stable. And they are going to remain stable. But please remember that we have to consolidate, or we have consolidated GORI, which means that we have a company more with all of the related items. So considering GORI, so 88 million, 90 million euros for 2019 in terms of provisions, yes. Thank you. The next question, again, Enrico Bartoli with Main First. Two very quick questions. One about public lighting. Now, the EBITDA was negative here, and you said that you expect this business to improve in 2019. Can you elaborate this further? What are the drivers behind this growth that you say that you will have, and what is the sustainable EBITDA for this business? And then another question about the acceleration of investments in 2019. Can you give us an indication about the main drivers of the different businesses? Now, as for public lighting, this year data is affected by the state of the plants that we assessed in 2017, and we had to make a number of interventions in order to solve problems. Well, if you consider this, they can be accounted for as investments. And then, of course, you need to wait for the effects of investments. And this moment, we only have, the impact of operating costs. Well, this year we had to guarantee the service while we were making investments. One of the most important investments that we have made is the remote control of the Rome network, and this is very important to guarantee the quality of the service in Rome, because you can do everything remotely. You can switch on and switch off everything from a remote without having maintenance people to go there and see what the problem is. Of course, we are making investments, also to support electricity distribution, and this is a business, since it is not related to big, profits, it has to be well balanced. Now, we are not, providers of a service throughout the country. We operate in a region, in a city actually, and the level of service that we provide is different since it's the capital of Italy. As to the acceleration of investments, well, instead of speaking about an acceleration of investments, we actually envisaged in the plan 2018 was a year of, accelerating investments. But Well, we went very fast. This acceleration occurred in the first 6 months of the year, and we closed the year with 630 million euros of investments, which is the average of the curve of investments of the business plan. When we present the business plan, we will tell you how this is going to be changed. When we said 20% more when issuing the guidance, well, this refers mostly to water and electricity networks and some investments in the waste business. And certainly there will be investments in IT systems to support our sales network and to support corporate activities. Now, basically, a lot of investments are to be made in the regulated business. And then when it comes to Gori, by consolidating Gori and by consolidating investments in Gori, as you know, it's going to be around 45-50 million a year. Let me remind you that if you have a question, you can do so by pressing star followed by 1 on your touchtone telephone. Well, ladies and gentlemen, at the moment there are no other questions booked on the conference call. Well, thank you very much for joining the conference call. As you know, the Investor Relations Office is always available for any question or request for clarifications you might have. Thank you very much and have a good evening.